What's up guys, JM here. Today we'll be covering Chapter 6 of Arc 5. Before we get into things, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on future chapter summaries and more ReZero content. Chapter 6 picks up from right where we left off, with Anastasia inviting Subaru and the others inside the Seasylph Lodge. Emilia, trying to ease the tension in the air, thanks Anastasia for welcoming them in person. While Subaru was lost in thought, hearing Emilia's concerned voice snapped him right out of it. Anastasia, frowning at Subaru, was most likely wondering where Garfield and Beatrice came from. She then turns to Emilia and says she has the same face as always. Subaru cuts in, saying that she's even cuter than before. Emilia scolds Subaru, telling him to not kid around with such a serious look on his face. Anastasia looked at Subaru and said, "Natsuki-kun, I heard that after the subjugation of the White Whale, things went a bit awry. Are Roswell's border territories doing well?" Subaru, trying to be slick, responds by saying, "Sorry you had to catch such unpleasant news. Thanks to your troops we survived the aftermath. As companions, we'll mutually support each other, right?" Anastasia, agreeing with him, decides to tease Subaru a little. She mentions that both her and Julius were glad that Subaru could come and that it's been a while since he's last seen Julius. Emilia and Anastasia start giggling. Subaru was not happy as the two of them did not understand his complex relationship with Julius. Subaru still isn't able to see Julius as a friend. I wonder if by the end of this arc, Subaru and Julius' relationship will get more development. They have a great dynamic with one another, and I want to see them work together, like how they did against Betelgeuse more. Garfield, who had been quiet this entire time, speaks up by saying, bit strange. Guess the woman's one of Emilia-sama's enemies?" Garfield, I knew you were dumb, but I didn't know you were this dumb. Why on earth would you say something hostile to a political rival that has you like a puppet on the string? Otto, you were so right. It's time to throw in the towel. Subaru wants to hide because of Garfield's comment. Don't worry, Subaru. Me too. And Anastasia's eyes get round as she's shocked at what she just heard. Emilia, trying to ease the tension, tells Garfield that he isn't wrong, but it's a very extreme way of putting things. Garfield, oblivious and as dense as a brick wall, says it won't matter if they're friends since they'll have to stab each other in the back at some point. Naive as always, Emilia tells Garfield that it's true and that she's worried about when the time comes since Garfield is a gentle person. Anastasia is just confused at what's going on, as Garfield gets very defensive and embarrassed, then a high-pitched voice calls to them. Garf is here. Miss, why didn't you tell me? The voice belonged to none other than Mimi. Full of energy as always, Mimi grabs Garfield's arm while telling him that she will guide him to his room. Garfield doesn't budge, which upsets Mimi. Eventually, Mimi is able to convince Garfield to come with her and drags him away. Anastasia and Emilia are just puzzled by what just happened. Anastasia, breaking the silence, asks Emilia who Garfield is. It makes sense that she would ask who he is, either for information purposes or just out of sheer curiosity. Knowing Anastasia, she probably wants to know for information purposes. Subaru was exhausted by having to deal with the stress that comes with talking to Anastasia. He's then greeted by Otto, who is confused on why Subaru looks so exhausted. We then cut to Subaru inspecting the Water Plumage Pavilion. The Emilia camp will be staying here. It's Pristella's most famous hotel. The Water Plumage Pavilion reminds Subaru of the hotels back in Japan. The design seems to be inspired by them and being built mostly out of wood. Subaru begins subtracting points for the pavilion as it isn't a true ryokan. He gives the pavilion 70 points out of a possible 100 as it's barely acceptable, but good enough. Beatrice, staring at Subaru, asks, "What are you talking about in fact?" Subaru continues his rant about the pavilion until Emilia walks in. Emilia mentions how the pavilion is so amazing, but strange on the outside. Otto joins in on the conversation and looks to Subaru, asking him if he's familiar with Kararagi-style customs. Kararagi has been described to adopt several of Japan's customs, according to Subaru, such as the buildings, the accents, the clothing, and many more. Subaru, hearing the phrase Kararagi style, asks Otto, "Kararagi style? Is this building a product of it?" Otto tells Subaru he's correct, as this building's architectural styles are directly inspired from Kararagi, but there's not many like it here in Pristella. Subaru wanted to learn more about this hotel and why its style was inspired by Japan. Otto answered his question. That would be because of Pristella's history itself. Hoshin of the Waste was responsible for its construction. I trust you've heard of him? Subaru recalls hearing about Hoshin of the Waste. How could he forget how drunk Otto simped for him? Otto continues, despite being born in such a dark age, he managed so many achievements. Even calling him a sage wouldn't be a stretch. However, it was due to how dazzling he was that disputes ended up happening. Pristella is a blend of Lagunican and Kararagian cultures. This was a result of Pristella being a part of Lagunica, but its founder Hoshin considered himself to be a Kararagian. The kingdom of Lagunica wasn't too pleased by Kararagi's growing influence in Pristella and took matters into their own hands to get rid of it. They were unsuccessful. The protests from locals and Kararagi getting involved were the major reasons. Lagunica and Kararagi began getting into several territorial disputes, which almost led to both countries becoming hostile towards one another. Although over time, the two countries' relations healed. Subaru was glad to hear that, then asked Otto if Kararagi customs can be traced back to Hoshin. Otto informs Subaru that he is correct, as Hoshin immediately influenced ideology, technology, and legislation from the start. Subaru's suspicions were spot on. Hoshin of the Waste was just like him and Al, another person summoned from a different world. Although Subaru is confused as to why all of them were summoned at different times, Hoshin from 400 years ago, Al from 20 years ago, and then himself a year ago. While Subaru was lost in thought, he is interrupted by the arrival of Anastasia. It would appear that everyone's enjoying the inn. Following behind Anastasia is a knight with purple hair, who turns to Emilia to greet her. Long time no see, Emilia-sama. I sincerely apologize for being late. I should have been the first to welcome you. Emilia smiles and greets the knight back. The knight begins complimenting Emilia for her beauty, then turns towards Subaru. It's been a while since we've met face to face. You seem lively as always, Natsuki Subaru Dono. It was none other than Julius. Subaru still isn't fond of him and made sure to let him know. Stop with your phony attitude. It sends shivers down my spine. Subaru don't know my ass. You're so transparent. Subaru and Julius began bantering with one another. Well, at least Julius was. I'm not so sure about Subaru. Julius, knowing that Subaru is now officially Emilia's knight, asks if he's working hard every day. Subaru wasn't pleased by his question. Do you even need to ask? After all, I was beaten horribly by someone who thought I was dishonorable or whatever. Julius smiles and says, it seems my reputation is being attacked. I recall it being an honorable duel. Julius realizes that Subaru is starting to get bothered by his comments and changes gears by praising him instead. It seems that your shortcomings have been rectified somewhat. If you learn to see things with a knight's perspective, you would go far. Emilia-sama and Roswell-sama have an eye for potential, it seems. Even so. Julius stops himself as he sees Beatrice standing next to Subaru. Beatrice isn't too pleased being stared at. Julius immediately apologizes as he did not expect a high-level spirit like her to be here. Beatrice, who still thinks Subaru is a better spirit knight than Julius, proudly introduces herself. Because Betty is Subaru's partner, it is natural I appear here. I am on a completely different level than those quasi-spirits who you have brought in. I wonder if you are afraid of me, in fact. Julius has 6 quasi-spirits contracted, which are in between great spirits like Beatrice and lesser spirits in terms of power. Subaru, sensing the growing tension between the two, tries to smooth things over. If you're comparing actual ability, we have so many faults and are such a waste of potential that we can't even compare to his quasi-spirits. Beatrice pouts and threatens Julius that something bad will happen to him were he to continue disrespecting Subaru. Even if he's a handsome man who causes her heart to waver. Subaru's taken aback and can't believe what he just heard. A handsome man who causes your heart to waver? Julius, realizing what's going on, attempts to clear up the misunderstanding. Do not misunderstand. Your spirit is not going to betray you. Her instinct is merely being shaken by my divine protection. Subaru becomes curious and asks Julius what his divine protection is. Julius is happy to explain his divine protection to Subaru. The protection I have is the blessing of gathering spirits. Simply speaking, it is a kind of blessing that garners the favor of spirits. I also have a contract with quasi-spirits of 6 attributes. Only with the power of that protection am I able to maintain them. Anastasia teases Julius for being attentive to Subaru. Julius naturally denies it as he's just trying to educate a fellow knight as his senior. Emilia chimes in, mentioning that she's glad that Subaru and Julius are getting along and she would be happy if they became good friends. Subaru is disgusted at the thought of that and tries to change the subject. Come to think of it, Why are only the two of you here? Mimi and Garfield are probably on a date, but... Anastasia informs Subaru that he is correct and that Mimi is with Garfield currently, and Mimi's two brothers are keeping an eye on the two of them. Naturally, Subaru followed up by asking if Ricardo was around, as he's normally the chaperone for the triplets. Julius answers on Anastasia's behalf and mentions that Ricardo and his brother Joshua currently have business elsewhere, then asks Subaru if he had met his brother yet. Subaru, annoyed, tells Julius that his brother's a lot like him and that he can leave now. Julius, sighing, tells Subaru that he will keep his interesting opinion in mind and that he has several concerns about his younger brother as an older brother. Otto, noticing the tension between the two, attempts to break the silence. Ahem, I don't mind this casual atmosphere, but now that almost everyone's here, could we all give introductions? Anastasia agrees with Otto as she wants to learn more about him and Beatrice. Otto jokes that it's not like Anastasia to be lacking information and if something is wrong with her reports. Anastasia jokes back and dodges the question by saying that it would be best if they don't get into whose information is accurate. Everyone begins introducing themselves and it goes pretty smoothly with some hiccups here and there. Once the introductions are done, Otto asks if they can talk business now. Anastasia's thrown off as hosts they are supposed to entertain their guests, but tells Otto they can. Otto, getting the green light, asks the big question on the Emilia faction's mind. Well then, first of all, what are your reasons for inviting us to Bristella? Anastasia smiles and tries to ease Otto's concerns. Don't worry, you don't need to be so on guard. I'm not planning anything. A year has passed since the king's election started, and we haven't had any opportunities to see each other recently, so I thought I'd just set one up. Otto isn't buying it. He's had a lot of experience negotiating and cuts right to the chase. Taking our situation into consideration, we're here because you lured us with bait. It's only natural that we would be cautious. Anastasia attempts to ease the growing tension. Well, we did invite you here for a reason. There are souvenirs in Bristella that you would want, aren't there? Think of this as a gift. Subaru jumps in. How did you know which gift we would want? Anastasia notices Subaru's visible frustration and covers her mouth while laughing. It's sort of a company secret, Natsuki-kun. We'll just say that I'm an inquisitive gal and leave it at that. Emilia tries to calm the hostile atmosphere by telling those in her faction to appreciate what Anastasia's done instead of being suspicious. While I think what Emilia is saying is true, I think she will blindly trust Anastasia, which is not the move, Chief. Anastasia chimes in, to respond to your enemy in such a well-intentioned way. Besides, I'm not helping you purely for your benefit, Emilia-san. Emilia smiles and thanks Anastasia. But thanks to you, I have a way to find what I've been looking for. Thank you. I don't know how I can repay you, but I truly do thank you. Anastasia is speechless. The only time she's interacted with Emilia, she was rude and outright dismissive of her. Emilia had absolutely no reason to be kind to Anastasia. Anastasia composes herself and mentions to Emilia that she still has a disadvantage that she needs to work around. Emilia agrees with her and that she's aware of her shortcomings and working her hardest to catch up as soon as possible. Anastasia cuts her off and corrects her that her biggest disadvantage isn't that, it's her resemblance to the Witch of Envy. Emilia is speechless and doesn't know what to say. Anastasia turns to Subaru and Otto. What about you two? Will you continue to support her? If you do, her reputation will affect your own. Subaru had suffered and gone through so much for her. This was probably the easiest decision during his time in Lagunica. I will, and I'll do my best to, because it's my policy to praise and support her no matter what. Otto backs Subaru up. Because of that, most of the burden lands on me. Funnily enough, I have no way out either. Anastasia then changes the topic to what Emilia needs, a colorless magical ore, one of the highest possible grades of purity. Emilia agrees and asks Anastasia if she can tell her what she knows. Anastasia begins sharing what she knows. The best supplier of high-density ore is Muse Company. The person responsible for it currently resides in this town, Kiritaka Muse, a man whose heart was stolen by strong stress. And that sums up Chapter 6 of Arc 5. This chapter was great. The build-up we had with the previous chapters came through when Otto and Anastasia began going back and forth. We also had the return of Julius and left on a semi-cliffhanger. I personally enjoy the interactions between Subaru and Julius. When Subaru became Emilia's knight, I really wanted to see Julius's reaction to it. Unfortunately, Julius already knew beforehand, but his banter with Subaru was entertaining. While I understand Subaru's reasoning for not liking Julius, I wonder if Subaru will ever let go of his grudge against him. Time will tell. Anastasia is definitely putting on an act. She didn't invite the Emilia faction for tea and cookies. We don't know the exact reason yet, but I'm sure it will be revealed soon. I wonder if Subaru and the others will listen to Emilia's request to not be suspicious of Anastasia. I'm sure they'll agree, but still be suspicious on the safe side. Anastasia mentioned that Ricardo and Joshua are taking care of business elsewhere. They could be bringing the other factions to Pristella. We will have to wait and see though, just like how we will have to wait and see how the Muse company will be able to bring back Puck. Let me know if you guys have any theories, predictions, or overall thoughts about the chapter or going forward in the comment section down below. I'll be reading all of the comments, then responding to and discussing 3 to 4 comments in the next video. Finally, I have 2 updates for the channel. Thank you guys for your feedback and support on the last video. I'm happy to announce that I will be continuing to cover individual chapters for Arc 5. I'm not sure if I will do it with Arc 6, but if you guys would be interested, please make sure to let me know in the comments section. The final update is on the 100 subscribers special. I apologize for the long wait. I have to split it up into 2 parts now as it's very long, but I do want to give you guys an idea of what it is. I only have one word: pride. With that being said, thank you so much for the support as always. If you don't want to miss out on future ReZero content, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.
悲しみを予感して